The Last of Us is one of the rare beloved games of the past decade that not only didn't demand a sequel, but actively seemed to resist the idea of one. Its story is poignant enough because of how self-contained it is. But with The Last of Us Part 2, developer Naughty Dog rises to the challenge with not only a complex and brutally emotional story that gives it a reason to exist, but also deep and satisfying evolutions to the original's third-person action stealth gameplay. Right off the bat, I promise there will be no Part 2 spoilers in this review other than what Sony has already shown in trailers and gameplay. Part 2 starts out seemingly simple, taking place about 4 years after the end of The Last of Us and setting an older, angrier, but still immune Ellie on a quest for revenge that hones in on the cycles of violence that can plague humanity as much as any infection. As it grows into something further reaching and ambitious, it knowingly leans into and often subverts the tropes of the genre, such as guilt by association and the inevitable escalation of matching an eye for an eye. Games are often defined by giving us the power to choose what happens, but The Last of Us and Part 2 concern themselves more with a specific depiction of its characters. We're asked to take them as they are, and that leads to some of the most fully realized characters in gaming who I always empathized with, even if I didn't always agree with them. It delivers experiences that are incredibly memorable for how uncomfortable and challenging it is to be forced to act them out yourself. Actors Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson return to add so much heart, honesty, joy, and sadness to the roles as Joel and Ellie respectively. Ellie is the protagonist of Part 2, and the focus on her allows for so many funny, frustrating, vulnerable, endearing, and frightening moments.
Fuck, this is so great.
It all stays true to what the original game established while deepening my understanding of her. Baker is no less fantastic as Joel, even though Part 2 is more focused on Ellie. He sells the weariness of a man who has taken so many lives to save his own and the lives of those he cares about, and made questionable moral decisions out of love.
You think I'd let you do this on your own?
There's also a great cast of supporting characters introduced, like Shannon Woodward's instantly charming Dina. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, though, in the most spoiler-free of terms, the incredible performance by Laura Bailey. Like so many of The Last of Us's characters, calling this new character purely good or evil would be reductive. Her motivations are just as legitimate and arguably noble as Joel's or Ellie's. Most of these actions revolve around the larger conflict between the warring groups in Seattle, where much of Part 2 takes place. The many characters you'll encounter here are one of the major ways in which Naughty Dog avoids the fatigue that set in for many with Uncharted 4's last act. Even though it's about 25 hours long, Part 2 never drags because there's always new voices to hear. The way stealth, action, and puzzle sequences play out remains very familiar. That said, Part 2 has taken major steps to add variety to avoid the repetition of the first game. And yeah, some of this sorta seems obvious in hindsight. Like, it's silly to think that adding a jump button in 2020 could feel fresh, but Ellie's athleticism most definitely proves to be key to keeping Part 2's combat encounters interesting and surprising over time. Whether you're going in loud or quiet, the scope of these battlefields is great. They take place in areas like multi-tiered shopping malls or fragmented skyscrapers that offer what feels like naturally complex puzzle boxes. There's always plenty of room to sneak around and pick off enemies one by one, or, as usually happened to me, plan to be stealthy but get caught and scramble to narrowly escape danger. Ellie's moves let you improvise to stay one step ahead of some significantly smarter and better coordinated enemies. That is, if you can learn to understand the various factions. Seraphites communicate via whistles, the WLF carry deadlier modern weaponry, and the infected... well, no, they haven't started talking to each other, but their mob mentality is more threatening than ever. New enemies like the Shambler throw noxious spore bombs that cut off potential escape routes or obscure other enemies. The returning stalkers become even scarier than before, with smart pack mentality as they hide away from Ellie's listen mode ability. Fights with this mixture of infected enemy types led to several encounters that rivaled the best survival horror experiences I've had. Speaking of horror, Part 2 has some of the most brutal combat animations I've seen in any game, and it's not played for laughs. I'm not squeamish, but I did sometimes find myself choosing to be stealthy just to save myself from watching this again. Playing non-lethally is often possible but rarely easy, especially when they loose the dogs who can track your scent even when you're well hidden from humans. You've got to move or you're dead meat, and sometimes that means running for your life. The artfully detailed and realized locations Ellie travels through are layered with backstory. It seems as though every room tells a tale of people frozen in time, and the density and detail of it astonished me. That's especially true of the Uncharted Lost Legacy style open world area, which rewards exploration with great character moments. It was also a huge relief that I never once had to find a floating pallet to use as a raft for someone who couldn't swim. Part 2's environmental puzzles never feel as mindless as that, because they rely a lot more on contextual challenges that make smart use of Ellie's journey through skyscrapers, residential neighborhoods, sewers, and much more. And those clever designs are dressed with some of the most beautiful environments I've seen from the PlayStation 4 generation. Fantastic audio design plays a big role as well. It starts with a moving score by returning composer Gustavo Santaolalla and goes all the way down to the little details. Characteristic for the region, the oppressive thump of rain masks the terrifying noises of the infected that lurk outside. From the slight hum of a silenced pistol to the harrowing boom of a shotgun, from the guttural screams of the clickers to the muttered self-reflection of Ellie as she kills an enemy. Naughty Dog's post-pandemic world sounds alive. The Last of Us Part 2 is a masterpiece worthy of its predecessor. Taking strides forward in nearly every way, Ellie steps into the spotlight and carries the sequel in a manner that feels like the culmination of everything that's made Naughty Dog's blockbuster storytelling so memorable. It delivers a layered, emotionally shattering story on top of stealth and action gameplay that improves the first game's mechanics while integrating a bit more of Uncharted's greater mobility and action. But while Part 2 is a thrilling adventure, it still makes time for a stunning, nuanced exploration of the strength and fragility of the human spirit. The PlayStation 4 has one of its finest exclusives in one of the generation's best games. For more on The Last of Us Part 2, check out our original review of The Last of Us and its Left Behind expansion. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
I told you. He should be terrified.